Welcome to Metrocasting. I'm Doug Farley, sitting here with State Representative David Millard. And in addition to his duties with the state and the area which he represents, David's also a bit of a historian and an author, but in pretty much one particular area, the Bloomsburg Fair. As a fair director, David, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're going to talk all about the Bloomsburg Fair because it's something that's near and dear to your heart. Why is the Bloomsburg Fair so important to you?
Well, I grew up 2 doors from the Bloomsburg Fair, and right on that fairgrounds, which is ever expanding acreage-wise, is where I learned how to drive, where I learned how to roller skate, and played ball over there, flew kites over there, all the things that kids do. And it was a safe haven. You weren't out in traffic, and it was just a great area to, to enjoy yourself as a kid.
It's a big open area, perfect for something like that.
Absolutely. And of course, the Bloomsburg Fair to me, from where I grew up in Bloomsburg, we certainly grew up in trying economic times, was the opportunity for me to earn money Fair Week. Mm-hmm. All the schools in Bloomsburg had off, obviously, and for me it was a moneymaker. So I looked at it as being able to buy my school clothes.
There you go. So, it's what we needed. At some point you decided to write a book about the history of the fair. Where did that come about?
Well, I have always been interested in history of everything Columbia County, Bloomsburg, Berwick, all around. But naturally, living next to the fair, that was pretty much one of my focuses. That when I tried to find some information about things years ago at the fair, I found out that there were not really a lot of references to it. Emma Lazarus had done a smaller book on the history of the fair, and I decided that I was going to do an undertaking and bring it all up to date and do pictures. People love to look at pictures. So I did really a year's worth of pictures in this book, because there's 365 photos in there.
It took a lot of time. And some of this stuff is in your own personal collection, other things you had to go out and find photos of in other people's homes. And tell me that experience.
Well, Fred Trump was the president of the fair when I wrote this book back in '95, and I asked him to put a notice out to the membership holders at the fair. There's 2,100 memberships that were issued. At the time I wrote the book, there were 1,856 active memberships. Mm-hmm. So they would have been the individuals whom they would have invited to the annual meeting for voting. So Fred Trump put a notice out to each of the members that I was writing this book, and if they had anything they wanted to share, my contact info was listed as well. And the calls started coming in, and it was very interesting that some people had one item, and they would say, well, I only have one item, but you know what? One item is one more than what you had.
Sure.
And if you take the time to look through the book at all the items that were photographed, you see how unique those items were. And if you follow the pattern of those items through the years, they will tell you a little bit of the history of the fair. When carnival glass was big,
sure,
there's a lot of items that were carnival glass at one time. And then it just kept evolving into different types of glass. And that in itself tells a story. Bloomsburg Fair is one of 109 in Pennsylvania. It originally started, of course, as an agricultural exposition, and it just kept growing with the great leadership throughout the years at the fair. It has grown, but always kept the mission of educating youth in agriculture, educating the public, a great place to network, and then, of course, the commercial end of it, came into being as well.
Sure.
Now, I handle, as a director at the fair, arts and crafts. And if you take the time to go through the arts and crafts, or the horticulture building, or the ag building, or even the animal barns, you can just see the pride in Pennsylvania residents, the craftsmanship that exists, the care that's taken when it comes to animals, from A to Z. It's all there, it's all Pennsylvania.
What's the oldest artifact you've come across?
The oldest thing is the shell trinkets that were sold at the fair. That's the earliest example of any any vendor trinket that I could find. And it evolved from shell work into glass of, various kinds, flash glass, ruby glass, milk glass, and the list goes on. But that's really about the earliest thing. One interesting thing was when I was reviewing all of the minute books, looking, through the years when acreage was purchased. The fair was held on 3 different sites.
Okay.
And the first fair was held where it currently is today. The Barton House is a very important part of history for the Bloomsburg Fair because that was the farmhouse of the farm where the fair was originally held.
Okay.
And of course the Barton House is about probably the only original federal period home in Columbia County. And it's still there and we maintain it well. So the second fair was held down near Columbia Avenue, somewhere in that area of Bloomsburg. And the third fair was held in the vicinity of the county jail.
Okay, so it's bounced around a bit.
It bounced around, and again, if you go back to those early years, the 1850s, there wasn't a lot of development.
Right.
Bloomsburg was barely, getting occupied and started. One thing that really helped the town grow, I think, was the trolley system when it came in. The Pennsylvania Canal was on its way out. The trolleys came. The trolleys disappeared. The buses came. So all of those things, again, tell a story within a story. But the Bloomsburg Fair, through the years, arrived by rail. And they would, somewhere in the neighborhood of Market Street and 7th Street, that would be the rail siding there, that they would unload all the carnival wagons and the animal wagons and have their little parade through, Market Street down to the fairgrounds.
Right.
And of course the automobiles and the horses and carriage parked in the infield at one time of the racetrack. And the original racetrack, of course, was up near Scott Avenue.
Okay.
And that was probably abandoned in the 1920s when they built the new grandstand and then established the racetrack in front of the grandstand.
How many acres is the fairgrounds now?
The fair is over 250 acres at present time. Started out with 10 acres after it was a rented event. And the 4th year of the fair, they acquired a couple acres, roughly around 10. I might be off a couple acres on that, but I know that for many years it was about 10 acres. And then as properties became available or acreage became available, again, those directors had the foresight to see that, this is going to grow and you're not going to create more land, so we need to buy it.
One of the things people always talk about when they come to the fair is obviously the food, and foods have changed quite a bit. Have you done some research into some of the older stuff? What was popular way back in the 1900s?
Well, one of the original stands at the fair was Cole's Oyster Stand.
Okay.
And that existed up until a couple of years ago
Right.
when the family finally gave it up. That was there when Abraham Lincoln was president.
Wow, that long ago.
It's just incredible. That and cider, the cider mill, was one of the early ones there. And then we can go back to some local families who got interested in the fair, the May family, the Hewlett family, the list goes on there with some of the families that have been well established in the area for generations.
Sure.
And saw that as an opportunity. And of course the churches have always been involved today to a little bit of a lesser degree, but
Right.
at one time there was actually what we called Church Row.
Right, I remember that.
And I don't think you could get a better meal than
Oh, they were fantastic.
going to something that was all volunteer like that.
Oh, sure. And it was all for the right reasons, and it was all
Absolutely.
to help the churches out, and we kind of need to get back to that because there's a lot of churches that are a problem today.
Oh yeah, and when you think of the Bloomsburg Fair or any fair, I always think of them as economic engines. And 109 of them, when you think about it, across the Commonwealth, the money that they generate locally. And studies have shown that if you put a pin on a map where the actual event is, go out 35 miles.
Okay.
Any business that is in the paper product business or the meat or the bread or condiment business, within 35 miles, they're definitely going to see a bump in sales during that event. And that's not even including hotels, motels,
Right.
local restaurants and gas stations.
So it is truly a big thing. Is Bloomsburg, the Bloomsburg Fair, is it kind of, I've always described it as the unofficial state fair of Pennsylvania.
Well, we like to think that. York will tell you different.
Right.
There's always been a friendly jaunting back and forth as far as who's been around the longest and, you know, for whatever purpose, and who gets the largest crowds and all that. But I would have to agree with you that with the acreage that we have and the crowds that we have, 500,000 and 600,000 people through the week, that we probably represent in comparison to every other state that has a state fair being a state fair.
Yeah, that's always kind of why I thought.
I mean, there's just nothing that they have that we don't have, really.
Right. The book itself, now, the task of writing can be tedious, but I get the feeling from you that this was rather a joyous thing for you to do.
The book took me 18 months from start to finish. And again, when Fred Trump put out the message that I was looking for artifacts and information, it took a lot of time to catalog everything, every person that you interviewed. You wanted to keep those notes. Every photo that you took, you wanted to catalog that and, you know, make sure that your references were correct, all the dynamics of writing a book. But it was just so interesting. It was a labor of love. It wasn't something that I ever got tired of. And, you know, even toward the end, new people through friends who had provided something for the book would by chance meet somebody somewhere and say that they had talked to me, and then that would lead to 2 or 3 other people.
Sure.
And it was just incredible, the interest in the community, in our community of Columbia County and beyond, the interest that people had and the pride that they had in the Bloomsburg Fair, which really is in itself an institution locally.
It is. It's the one constant through the generations.
It absolutely is. And, you know, I looked at individuals who had ribbons, generations of ribbons that were won by their great-grandparents, their grandparents, and that was just the, you know, the incentive for the grandchildren to, I've got to enter something in the fair because I want a ribbon to hang with Grandpa's ribbon.
Absolutely.
I actually have enough information to do an update to this book, and some really neat photos that are not in the book that would just be incredible. The guy blowing the fire out of his mouth, the fire eater, in front of the painted canvas tents from back in the 20s and 30s. I mean, there's just so many other things that have been provided to me that I could actually do an update to it.
And you might want to consider that.
Well, and a lot has happened, Doug. You know that we've had a lot of flooding events since this book was written, and one that actually closed the fair for the entire event.
Right, and so there's more to be written, and it's an ongoing history, and every year adds another chapter.
Absolutely, and we're very proud of Caleb Barton. When you look in this book, of course, the Barton House on the fairground, and there's a mini history of the Barton family there that has direct ties to the Civil War.
Wow.
And like I said, this history book has many fingers to it. It just leads to so many other places. And it's just great local history that, you know, really tells you about life at the time and through the ages. There are headlines in here that from the morning press that they allowed me permission back then to print, that just show that story of all the things that happened throughout, you know, 50, 60, 70 years. And really, it's incredible when you go back and look at all the things that happened in the nation and the world that were going on at the time of the fair.
Right.
And you know, it's just good reading.
It almost sounds like it's something that the kids really should be not forced to read, but encouraged to take a look at, because it's going to show you where your ancestors came from.
Well, my goal when I wrote the book was that it would be informative and that it would be fun to read. And I think that I've accomplished that, and I hope that those who have the book will agree.
That sounds good. Thank you so much for your time.
But thank you.
And we'll see you again later.